Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare.
All right, welcome. Good to be back. I was here virtually last week, so in person this week. Feels good. Looks like we have a special guest at the Here and Now Centers. Is that right? Who's that in the front row? Wow. All right. Got some people from Syracuse, Rachel and Ryan, that are our counterparts all the way out in Syracuse. They're in Gunnison, Colorado at the Here and Now Center tonight. Welcome. So last week we tapped into, wrapped up on a nice Western study on mind and science and well-being. And, that's, I think, one of the beautiful things about the text that we get to engage in here is, how do we bring and clarify some of these Buddhist teachings in the modern Western world that we're living in? And what are some of the differences, and how can we relate to it in a way that kind of can make a little more sense within our framework? I think there's a lot of confusion and misunderstandings, even with terms and the way things are expressed. One of the things is like simple quotes by a Dalai Lama can get very, just turned around, when he's saying that, the real path is, the ultimate goal is happiness. Well, we could easily, happiness, hot fudge sundae, I've got some happiness. He's not talking about sense pleasure. He's talking about that rich flourishing of that our very nature is one that is blissful, luminous, non-conceptual, that we're never afflicted, that we're not obscured, like, an ultimate, what some people in the West will call it genuine happiness. It's our very nature, which is not stimulus driven or, affected by outside circumstances. It's an inner quality that's actually already within us. So that, that can be very, not very well explained what's the, happiness. And the truth of suffering, we use the word suffering a lot. And, as we talked about early on in these teachings, it's not like traumatic suffering. Sometimes it could be, but there's a lot of very pleasurable things that also can be stressful, or there can be at dis-ease, some discomfort. And so it's real good to be clear about what the terms mean from a Buddhist perspective, what they mean in our world. Some things don't fit in the little boxes. And so where we're headed now, if I should pause and just see if anyone had any thought or question from last week that they've been tinkering around with. We had a little discussion earlier. I think I have an answer for you, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. It's something that ponders. So one of the thoughts was for those of you who were in the discussion, and part of it was some research saying that, we have innate goodness. We have this innate goodness that's, that they're researching and finding some something to support that in modern Western research. But then we talk about sociopaths, right? So now, if you believe in multiple lives in Buddhism, that makes sense. You're coming in with some karma, and you're born that way from previous, previous lifetimes. But what if so let's say I'm Westerner, that whole idea about rebirth, that doesn't make a lot of sense, maybe. So my head's not right there. How would that work? And then there's a bump. So maybe the bump is, maybe there is multiple lives, that explains it. But maybe there's another explanation for those who don't quite get there yet. And I was thinking about that because, when I meditate, why would I just focus on the breath? But the research around sort of generational trauma. And so where within our genes and so forth, the genetics, trauma can be passed down to us by our grandparents and, and so forth and beyond. A lot of research on that. And I remember being at one conference where it was, can't remember the specifics, but it was a certain kind of trauma that would come from the grandmother, skip the daughter, and wind up in the grandchild, a daughter, a female. And, so I was thinking, wow, what if, maybe it's coming from previous genetics and traumas and things of the past that had created that whatever we call it in Buddhism an affliction and an obscuration, an inability to connect and to feel those feelings. So I was thinking that might be an interesting something to look at. And that's the thing, we don't know what we don't know. In the talk last week, they were really talking about how we used to think, the brain cells won't regrow, that, brain just deteriorates. But that's not the way it is, okay? We thought that's the way it is. That's not the way it is. Neural pathways grow and become new. The structure of the brain can change. Well, didn't know that before. Now we know. Genetic, the way it displays, I'm missing the word I'm trying to say here, genetic expression, gene expression. Didn't know you could dial that up and down. We didn't know. I mean, if somebody were to tell me that you could put, a microchip in a phone like this and it could, tell you where to drive, you could talk to people, you can video chat with people, you could record, really? Like when I was growing up, this was not, Get Smart when it had a shoe phone. I mean, that was pretty cool, but you had to take your shoe off and you had to take the heel out and dial it, and that was pretty cool, right? I mean, that was way ahead. And so I think that's this wonderful thing is curiosity and exploration, rather than, we can, at this moment, this is kind of what I know about life, but I think we all, as we grow and we see the world change, we ourselves change, curiosity about what is possible. It's hard to say, to not limit things to, who knows? Someone can change, not change, things happen. And that is, I think, at the core, Buddha, that was his whole point, was, do we need to suffer? Do we need to feel this disease? Do we need to go through aging, sickness, death, and all these things? Is that what everybody's regulated to? And so he devoted his life to doing that. He went through all the physical stuff of the aesthetics, starving yourself to your body and all those harsh things that they do. And he went through, the different variations of meditation training, high samadhi, didn't get there, didn't get through here, but he kept searching. And ultimately, he woke up. That's kind of thing. He woke up, he discovered, he saw who he was, which is free of all those afflictions and free of all these limitations. And so at the core, though, was investigation. And so that's the invitation, always to investigate, I think that there are many paths. I think there are many ways of engaging the world. I think different people in different cultures, different situations will discover different things for themselves. And Buddhist path, is even within a Buddhist path, we've got lineages, we've got different types of practices that meet people in different mindsets. Even the Buddha gave different teachings on different things at different times, based on the people he was talking to. And then the Buddha didn't always teach about awakening. If a couple was having a family problem, he'd be talking about how to get along, and have a better marriage. So, how could I be beneficial here? And I think that people are in different places in their journeys in life, and different things will ripen. I hope that sometime in somebody's life, wherever they are, that they ultimately can land on a method and a path to make some real progress in the journey. So, this is, of course, a more Tibetan Buddhist path that we're presenting. But there's other paths. But the thing about a path that's nice is it gets you somewhere. Whereas taking a little of this and a little of that, I kind of like that philosophy, kind of like that. Ooh, it's pretty cool. I'm not really getting anywhere. And a lot of our spiritual seeking, or even philosophical or psychological seeking, a lot of times if we're just seeking this or that, this resonates, that makes sense, this doesn't make sense, I don't buy that, I do this. What we tend to do is just gravitate to the things that reaffirm what I believe. And that's not very helpful. I'm already there. It's the analogy is, I keep, if it's a table, I keep finding things that reinforce, the legs of the table, my belief system. And the approach here is very different. It's, does that belief hold up? Does that belief? And so that's kind of the tendency that we have. We have a belief system, and then we find people and kind of like our belief system. We like those people; they're pretty cool. And those other people think different. They're clearly idiots. And what are they thinking? And Dalai Lama has a pretty good quote: "If you're the one doing all the talking, you can't really learn anything new." And so a lot of times in our quest, we're doing all the talking, right? I'm finding a book that, that resonates. It's interesting when people say, well, that resonates with me. And a lot of times it's the things that don't resonate are where you're going to find some growth. Not to disregard the things that do. Like you can have a visceral knowing, and I think that's right, intuition. But so that's important. But just that idea of within Buddhism to question, to check, to test. And don't take any of this just because it was written there. Dalai Lama said it. It's like, well, how does this work? And even when the Buddha was approached by, the people when he was coming to give teachings, how do we know you're the one? Everyone says they're the one, their teachings, right? I said, you don't. It's not my job. You're supposed to check. You check. You see if they work. That's how we find this stuff out. So I'm prefacing all this just because that is one of the mindsets that's going to be very helpful. Instead of, oh, okay, figure that out, put it in a box. Right? We were talking about just, personalities and things like that. And I'll tell you, in counseling and therapy, that was one of the things, psychosocial evaluation. Okay, put a nice little label. This person's like this, and then this. And then I'm going to start seeing that person like that. And which is good to a point, right? Obviously, it's very helpful. But can we not put them entirely in a box, And I remember back when I worked in the field, I would never read a psychosocial evaluation until after I met the person, just because I wanted to experience them without any, any knowledge and what's my experience of this person. Then I'll read the other stuff and get scared. But, that's the thing. We can get limited even by someone introducing someone to it. So-and-so, they're a great person. They're cool. So-and-so, they're kind of, crotchety, kind of, rock, and then what am I going to see, right? I'm already filling in the picture. And so with the Buddhist approach, we really want to, fix labels and things are appropriate, but know that they're temporary and they're not all encompassing. And keep an open curiosity available. They call it a beginner's mind. This is what's a little different about Sam today. He hurt his knee. That's what's a little different. That's why he's wiggling his toes at me. So, knowing these, what happens, we tend to stick a label and then this is like that. And then we don't look back again. Those people are like this, slap a label on. These things are like that. And for years, I wouldn't, get into a Ford. Who'd buy a Ford? It's a Chevy guy. And, it's funny, I could have a bias like that. And, I'm sure one car or the other, just who I was raised or where we're at. And just things that get in our mind that get very habituated. So, so as we move into these next two sections of the text, what they're going to be doing is kind of talking about different perspectives and kind of a way a Buddhist will present things. And certain words don't even match up to, they don't even have words. And we don't have words for what they're doing. And so in different cultures, they don't relate. I mean, I'm going on a whole tangent here, but like the word love, a lot of other languages and cultures have many different types of love, right? And we have love, I love pizza and I love my wife. I'm pretty sure it's not the same kind of love, right? And it just, everything gets lumped in, and so and other cultures have these very different words for different types of love, very different words. And likewise, we have some very refined words for things that others don't even have words for. So each culture is going to be relating to the world, even in their own language, and the way that they see the world based in that framework. And other cultures may not even have that framework. And so that's where we're kind of at here, is to start to understand some of those differences. All right. We good to get into the text, everyone there? Pam's nodding. We're good, right? Okay. All right. Okay. Because we're going to be talking about happiness and virtue. So while both Buddhism and psychology seek to help people have more happiness and fulfillment and decrease their unhappiness and misery, they differ somewhat in what they consider positive and negative emotions. Some psychologists and scientists that I've spoken to, so this is, I believe, is His Holiness 14th Dalai at this point. A little later, Thubten Chodron will identify herself. So I'm assuming she'll be more clear about when she's speaking. But so this is His Holiness. I'm confident. Some psychologists and scientists I've spoken with say that a negative emotion is one that feels bad and makes a person unhappy at the time it is manifest in their mind. So, we can feel bad. We can get that, negative emotion. A positive emotion makes the person feel happy at the time it is manifest. So this is just directly relational to how I feel in a moment, feel a good emotion, feel a difficult emotion. In Buddhism, what differentiates positive and negative emotions is not our immediate feeling of happiness or discomfort, but the happiness or suffering that is the long-term result of those emotions. I'm going to pause there because already there's an asterisk. A little later in the book, they're going to explain that how we're using the word emotions are not at all how Buddhists use the word emotion. So when they're saying that Buddhism is going to have positive and negative emotions, it's not really the types of emotions that we're having. But what they're saying is, we'll unpack it a bit. So what differentiates positive and negative emotions, not our immediate feeling of happiness or discomfort, but the happiness or suffering that is a long-term result of those emotions. So what's going to be the long-term impact? That is because the long-term effects of our actions are considered more important than their short-term effects, which tend to be fleeting in comparison. If in the long term an emotion produces unpleasant experiences, it is considered negative. If it brings happiness in the long term, it is positive. So something I'm doing now that is difficult, but later, I'm going to really have a good result, and that's positive, and vice versa. So Buddhism explains that virtuous, positive, constructive, wholesome emotions. So they're giving synonyms. When we're talking about virtuous activities, you might use the word wholesome activities, constructive, positive. In Buddhism, the ethics are not about a judgmental God saying, you screwed up, you did well, here's a reward, or here's a punishment. Buddha just basically saw these types of activities will turn out to have this negative result. It's just the way it is. It's just, just calling it like it is. So there's no judgment. People who are very, do a lot of good things will do some things that aren't so good, and they're going to pay a price. And some people that do some pretty unwholesome things, will do some good things and they'll get a result. So it's not about being a good or bad person. It's about us being afflicted or obscured in some way and acting out in one way or another, and just what the results will be. So there's no, right and wrong. There's just cause and effect, basically. And so you'll use the different words. So virtue, you'll use wholesome or constructive or positive. Those are less used, but I think they're putting it in there because it makes sense to us. So Buddhism explains that virtuous emotions lead to happiness in the long term. That's the definition. If this is going to have a good result, then it's virtuous. So you have a painful result, non-virtuous, right? Not I'm a bad person, so I'm going to get punished. It's actually the result that defines whether it's virtuous or wholesome or not. So while non-virtuous, negative, destructive, unwholesome emotions lead to suffering. And here's where we're going to get into some fun. The Buddha presented 4 scenarios in which present happiness, pain, happiness / pain, and virtue / non-virtue are at play. This can be out of a Buddhist text. Just, we like to go through these things. Here, when someone feels a certain kind of pleasant feeling, I'm having a pleasant feeling, in this situation, non-virtuous states increase in them, and virtuous states diminish. So I can have a pleasant feeling, what we call a good emotion, and at the same time, my non-virtuous rises, and my non-virtue diminishes. But when someone feels another kind of pleasant feeling, virtuous states, non-virtuous states, I'll get this right. I keep wanting to put virtuous first. So pleasant feeling, non-virtuous states will diminish and virtuous states will increase. So I can have a pleasant feeling, it can go either way. Likewise, when someone feels a certain kind of painful feeling, non-virtuous states will increase and virtuous states will diminish. Someone else feels another kind of painful feeling, non-virtuous states diminish and virtuous states increase. I like to pick out all the scenarios. So basically, I can have a good feeling and it can really become very unwholesome result. I can have a good feeling, could have a good virtuous result. Or likewise, painful could lead to virtue. Painful could lead to a lot more pain. This thought-provoking citation is worthy of some illustrations. As it says, there are 4 possible permutations of feelings and ethical value. In the first, a pleasant feeling accompanies an increase in non-virtue and a decrease in virtue. An example is feeling happy when we successfully deceive others about a vile action that we've committed. You don't see that word very often, vile. Vile action that we've committed. So we can feel pretty good about it, yeah. Even though it may be accompanied by a pleasant feeling, our action is not virtuous, since it is the cause of future suffering. And so that's the point. We're looking long-term cause and effect. I can feel pretty happy about doing something, cheating someone, feel pretty good, get some money. But that's going to have a lasting impact. Again, just in the psychological world, there's this word called shame. And, we're going to carry this stuff with us. So, it's actually not, yeah, I felt pretty good about something in a moment, but there's going to be a long-term impact on me. In the second, there is a pleasant feeling when a non-virtuous state decreases and a virtuous state increases. An example is taking delight in making a generous offering to a charity that helps refugees or the poor and hungry. This kind of happiness is a win-win. We feel joyful now, and our action creates the cause for future happiness for self and others. All right, so it feels good, joy. Empathetic joy, really joy for other stuff. I mean, that's a really good, it's one of the four immeasurables. And we're going to feel good about it. And now we're going to the negative ones. A third occurs when an unpleasant feeling accompanies an increase in non-virtue and a decrease in virtue. An example is the pain. Someone who angrily rejects being sentenced to prison after being convicted of embezzlement. It's an interesting choice. So someone being convicted, they're angry, they've embezzled, they're guilty. Not taking responsibility for their non-virtuous action. They keep, just so you know, it says he angrily blames others. There's a lot of he's. I switch those to they, and then, humans. So I just want to make that clear. I'm changing a word here and there. Not taking responsibility for their non-virtuous action, they angrily blame others, creating more non-virtue. If they accepted responsibility for their action and regretted it, their virtue would increase and their pain would lead them to potentially change their ways, right? So I could get held accountable, could get sentenced to prison, could see that as an opportunity to change my life, take some responsibility and change my life. Or could get angry, blame others, go the other way. In the fourth situation, we have a painful feeling, but our non-virtue diminishes and our virtue increases. An example is taking a lower paying job to avoid having to lie to clients or customers. In this case, creating virtue that will bring happiness in the future and peace of mind right now also brings some unhappiness of a loss of income, but is undoubtedly worthwhile in the long term. So, picking a job that you can feel good about, that your ethics are good, makes a little less instead of making a lot of money, kind of lying, cheating, or, engaging in other things. I personally have experienced that. I left a corporate job to clean carpets and go back to school and spend time with my daughter because it was getting to a point where I would have to lie to keep doing that other job. Felt much better. Making some examples of these, I just want to throw another example in there because every time they talk about painful experience as a long-term good result, root canals. Just because Matthew Ricard uses that, it's kind of visceral, right? I'm willing to endure the pain of a root canal for a long-term, benefit to your teeth. That one always pops up in my head. That there's certain things that we do that don't feel good, but we're going to feel good about, or will provide us with some better health, right? Surgeries, things of that nature. So making some examples of these from your own experience is useful. Such an exercise helps us to value our ethical integrity more than the fleeting happiness of getting what we want at the moment. Since our self-esteem and feelings of self-worth depend more on our ethical integrity than sensual pleasure, it is worthwhile to take the time to remind ourselves of these values before impulse arises, so that when the time comes, we will make wise decisions. And this is really, hopefully, the bulk of what we'll get to talk about. Yep. Self-esteem and feelings of self-worth depend more on ethical integrity than on sensual pleasure. We must remind ourselves of these values before impulse arises, so that when the time comes, we'll make wise decisions. that is incredibly hard to do anymore. In the world that we live in, with so much quickness and distraction, what is it like to make an ethical choice? I mean, when you think about how many choices you make in a day, I mean, we could be making multiple choices in an hour. I mean, just and then our minds being distracted. A lot of people, and maybe see if you relate, might even find it uncomfortable to just sit in silence without a book or something to distract you, or you know what I mean? It gets uncomfortable. It's not even usual, right? I mean, I fly on a plane, and if either on a headset, on a device, in a book, or sleeping. Sometimes people talk. That's more rare. But when our minds are so distracted, how often can we make a conscious decision about getting something that will, might feel good, but maybe that's really not going to support my health, my well-being, my ethics, or even as a conscious choice? And is it really in alignment with my values? I mean, when's the last time we checked that before, thinking about that candy bar? And yet, our very ultimate sense of well-being is going to be based on that. The temporary pleasure of a moment is super fleeting, stimulus-driven. And what's happening in our neural pathways are this beautiful little thing called dopamine. Whoa, that feels good. And the mind associates, that good sensation with the events and things that kind of go around that. So whatever it is, whether it's food, whether it's exercise, whether it's sex, whether, these days, addictions take so many forms. And there's a little release, and this feels good. And then my mind goes, well, when I do that, I get this. When I do that, or even I'm in the neighborhood of it. I mean, I'm pretty aware anytime I'm near Colorado Donuts. I mean, I don't have to visually know it's there, but my car's like, oh, it's a right turn over there. And so what happens is our brain gets hijacked, and we call it the dopamine highway. It can actually bypass executive function. This is what addiction, whether it's gambling, sex, substances, food, exercise, work, so many things that we can get caught up in. And then we're uncomfortable if we're not doing it, or it's deprived from it, and so relating to this is that our whole lives can be chasing feeling good at the expense of feeling good about who we are and what we're doing. And so how do we return to a really positive emotion of engaging in feeling good about the good thing I'm doing, and allowing a little bit of dopamine to come out with that? I made time for a friend today. I made time for a friend today. I called someone. I took a walk, and took delight in somebody with their dog or whatever. And that stuff actually feels pretty good. But often people can even just not feel good about, well, what's the next thing to do? Let's go next, I finally made it, I used to, I can be on a beautiful beach in Hawaii. It's pretty cool. You always see those pictures, right? You could be here, and they got somebody in a little lounge chair, and the ocean's there, lounge chair. Not that many people can just sit in that chair. They're planning dinner, what they're going to do tomorrow, and there's you can go look at those little fish, get a little snorkeling. That's the word I was looking for. That's good. It's not. And so here I am sitting looking at all this, and my conversation can be due about what's next. It's very sneaky, very sneaky. So going back to the text here, they are sharing how can we be more present with actual causes of future well-being. So in this moment, how about a very simple analogy I think we can all relate to? If I do this, will I feel good about it tomorrow? If I do this, how it will impact my body or my emotions or my friendships. Is this the best use of my time for the person I want to become? So this idea of delayed gratification, this idea of making choices that really support who I want to be. I have a friend, and she was great. She nailed it. I bet we can all relate to this one. She said, I've always thought of myself as, I want to be like a meditator. I don't actually want to meditate. I mean, that's a lot of work, but I want to see myself as someone who meditates, and, it's like, I get that, you know what I mean? I want to be that peaceful, at ease, so inside. That work to get there, that's a whole different thing. But, and that's kind of what we're pointing to is that there's a lot of little things that we do that feel good temporarily that postpone the things I know I want to do to be the person I want to be. I'm really way too busy creating stress, worry, and fear in my life to make time to eliminate it. I got to rearrange the sock drawer or catch that next. What's the thing? It's the Lord of the Rings thing that's out again. Yeah, man, that's pretty important right now. And so what's sneaky here is how we chase being happy for a moment and postponing doing things that would allow me to feel pretty good most of the time. And that's sneaky. And so a lot of the things that give me a temporary pleasure basically are just not healthy for me. I have a lot of things that'll apply. Colorado donuts probably not going to get me the body I want, just saying. Or overall health, how I feel, and so forth. But we do that with interactions, we do it with distractions, we do it with a lot of things that give us a short time. And then what happens is that becomes habit. And then it's hard to break habit. I don't know, it was Churchill or somebody. There's this really cool quote, that habits are sneaky and unnoticed until they become too hard to break. It's like, whoa, don't want to do that anymore. And so the invitation here is to, first of all, differentiate between stimulus-driven short-term pleasure. And nothing wrong with that, and there's times for it and balance in our life. But understanding that it's not the activity as much as it is why I am doing it. That's the key. Why am I doing it? What's the motivation? Is it wholesome? Is it beneficial? Is it helpful? Is it coming from a place of, I need my body restored. Sitting in a hot tub and having, a lemonade could be a very good thing. Restore my body, let my muscles heal. It could be very good. Or I could be jumping in that hot tub because I don't want to talk to my partner and, escape and, whatever. So the same action, just as he was pointing out, can have very different results. Why am I doing it? Wholesome, unwholesome, virtuous, non-virtuous. There's a top 10 list and of actions that we do with body, speech, and mind that we post every day. So can I engage in this activity, or is this activity I'm engaging? It might be painful, but I'm going to feel good about it tomorrow. Another real simple one, we teach similar stuff in our Mindful Life program. So our Mindful Life teacher, always talk about this, because it's core. if I do things I feel good about, I'll feel good about who I am. And if I do things I don't feel good about, I will not feel good about who I am. I mean, that's the short version of all this. There's a much deeper level karmically, which we'll unpack, but that's a short answer about my own self-worth and value. And so doing something, it was actually in Syracuse. I've got the Syracuse people there. And they said, well, what about mowing my neighbor's yard, man? I have to mow that for them all the time. They're kind of laid up, and it's a pain in the butt. I don't feel good about that. Where's the genuine happiness? So how would you feel about yourself if you didn't mow their yard? I feel like I'm lazy and I'm not helping my neighbor. Yeah. See, that's the difference. Doing something, even you could do it a little bit disgruntledly, like here I am mowing the yard again. But how would you feel about yourself if you didn't do it? Something's driving you to do it. I have, so every day, we, those of you in the Buddhist program know I record a daily morning practice and we post that. I do one in our other program, and there's this one guy whose email has got a glitch, so it blocks the notification. Now he's older, and there's no way he's gonna call tech service and get it fixed. I've talked to him about that. So every day I record it, I post it, and then I copy it, and then I email him personally the thing, right? He's a wonderful guy. And at first I'm like, I told him, let me do this for a couple of weeks till you call your provider. And he didn't call his provider. So I do this I've been doing it for over a year, a couple of years. I don't know, it might be a year and a half or something. And, like my initial attitude is, man, I have to go through these extra steps. And then I realized, like every time I do it, now it's joyful. You know how many extra steps it is? You have to copy something and you have to click copy. Highlight, then you have to go. Then I actually have to go all the way over and click on another thing for an email and put paste. And I have to fill in a subject line. And then I have to set, because you can schedule to go at a certain time. And I have to click. It takes me an incredible amount of 30 seconds, And yet the mind can be, man, that's an extra thing I have to do. Or today it's like, how cool I got to do this, And the mind, but how would I feel if I didn't do it, right? So the actions are the same, but with what mind am I bringing to it, right? So I'm going to pause there, see if anyone has any thoughts on virtue, non-virtue, temporary happiness, the way that we can be driven without consciously really making decisions about what is really going to bring me lasting happiness or not, or a short-term feel-good decision. So I'll pause there, see if anyone has any thoughts or examples, or need clarity, or have a good joke.
Mark must have something to say, doesn't he?
Is there a hand?
No, he
Oh, no.
must have something to say.
Hi, John.
Hey, how you doing, Mark?
Pretty good. Today I visited, I'm here in Montreal and for a memorial for a friend who died a couple of weeks ago now, and that's scheduled for Friday. And our mutual friend, Richard, I've been spending some time with him as well.
Great.
And we're all getting older. Richard will turn 81 in a couple of weeks. Louis was 78 when he died. Not so old, really, but he had been in ill health for the past couple of years. And Richard's sister is 93 and in a nursing home right now.
Oh.
And we visited her today. And, thinking through these various states of virtuous and non-virtuous feelings and emotions and regarding unhappiness and happiness, I'm reflecting on these things now, on death, on the loss of friends, on spending time with people who I haven't been able to see for the past couple of years because of the pandemic. And it just seems that it's a lot more complicated than just these binary kind of this, that, one and the other. But that there are just layers and layers and layers of feeling and emotion and, virtue and non-virtue and all of these things. Hard to just simplify it to the point where you can see this will produce this and that will produce something else, because it gets all mixed up in these feelings. Just as an example, today while Richard and I were visiting his elderly sister, it's hard to think of elderly because I'm elderly, but to think of her, she's older than me by 10 years or so, like 20 years or so. And while we're sitting there, she's lost so much weight and she's become incapacitated, but her mind is still sharp and very lucid. And we were having a lot of fun remembering old times and thinking about stuff. And as I got ready to leave, I told her, I'm going to get her address and start writing her at least once a month, just sending a note just to see how she's doing and what's going on. And she was delighted with that. She liked that idea. And I promised that I would practice my French so I would be better in French and be able to write some things in French to her as well. But do you see what I'm driving at? It's very complicated. It's not just, I did this and I felt good, or I did this and it's going to bring long-term goodness or long-term satisfaction. It's going to bring a lot of sadness and sorrow and complicated, stuff going all along. And, that's kind of the richness of life, that we screw up and then we do better, and then we screw up again and then we do better. At least for me, that's been my experience in life, that I don't always maybe act in an ideal way, but somehow get through it and come to the other side of it in a different way. And I don't know. I'm just babbling now. Anyway, thanks for letting me share that.
No, thanks. No, very rich point. And, what you're sharing gets to one of my favorite quotes of all time, which is never let your sense of morals prevent you from doing the right thing. Things don't fit in nice boxes. And, if I got this list of how to behave, that's not always going to apply in this situation. And in this situation, what might be helpful. And so that's that curiosity. And as you're pointing out, it gets messy sometimes. And but what I think is foundational that is just clear is that when I seek to do the best possible thing, that's never going to be a bad outcome in the long term. Could have a pretty immediate bad outcome because I could, mess something up quite badly. Had a good intention, did something poorly. And then as Mark's pointed out, I could have a bad intention, something good can come out of it, right? It gets messy. And then I think the really sneaky thing that you're alluding to that's trickier in this is that some of the poor choices that I've made have led me to become a better person today because I learned from them, right? So that doesn't quite fit the formula in a sense, right? Because but therein lies where we need to underlie that maybe when I was making that poor choice or that in anger or whatever, my core motivation was coming from some deeper suffering or pain and a desire to be a good person. But the anger or the activity overtook that. And then also things ripen over time. So, many of us, I think we can all relate to, have not been champions of virtue throughout our lives. And yet here we are talking about virtue. And so that's the other process, that both the negative and unwholesome and the wholesome and so forth, they manifest, they come to fruition. And every event that's happening now is an opportunity to grow, to learn, to be a better, person in this body. But what the Buddhist point is, the more that I'm able to do that, the more the result will be beneficial. We're going to get into more direct cause and effect as we get into karma and so forth. But at the baseline, I think there's a pretty clear thing that I can feel good about myself when I do things I feel good about, and I can feel not so good about myself. I don't do things. I can forgive myself quicker now making mistakes and doing things that are harmful. And that comes with wisdom. But it is very messy. And, life is, I like your words, Mark, the richness of life. With the ups and downs, the struggles, the sadness, the joys. But here's more the point of this section of the text was to differentiate between a short-term pleasurable feeling and what Buddhists would call, a wholesome or unwholesome one, which is going to have a much greater effect in terms of our ethics and long-term results. So they're just differentiating how they're viewing happiness as not getting what I want, wanting what I have, right? And not it being those things as much as how I relate to these things. You can get an award. That can feel pretty. You get an award, but if you didn't earn it, it's a different feeling than if you really earned it and you get it, right? Same award. Yeah. So therein lies that fundamental underlying dynamic. But again, here we want to differentiate that. Mark, really appreciate it. I don't know if you heard, but Sam said, man, Mark will probably have something to share. Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
And yeah, thanks for all the good you do, being out there.
Oh, thank you.
All right, well, we're coming up to the end. The next section we're going to get into, going to start to clarify like the words around emotion and what there's really not a Buddhist word so much for emotion and how to kind of put them in the framework. So we're not going to open that box right now. But any other thoughts or questions here in the last couple minutes about just anything with your practice or Buddhist teachings? I was thinking Carla might have some.
Well, I'm just glad there are some synonyms for virtuous and non-virtuous, because I feel like the words virtuous and non-virtuous are, I don't know, maybe a little archaic, or in our culture maybe have a slightly different meaning. So that was something, we every day we talk about virtuous and non-virtuous activities in our meditation, and it's just that word just didn't really resonate. Those words didn't really resonate with me. So I think I get a little bit better grasp on what exactly it is that they mean.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I like to use beneficial and unbeneficial personally. Really common is also found wholesome and unwholesome. That's got a little nicer feel, right? Virtues can feel a little bit more judgmental, but I'm a bit of a fan of Aristotle play on virtue, so I don't mind using it so much. But if I'm teaching, I really like to focus on beneficial, unbeneficial. And then we can almost use skillful and unskillful. I have a friend who uses skillful and not yet skillful. I like that. He's nicer than I am. That's very encouraging. Not yet skillful, activity. But those are the things I think, both of you are hitting on things that are really relevant. Is just words can carry a lot of energy with them, right? The words we use, and they can be very loaded, and some of these concepts don't translate very well, and then also we carry a certain view with them, and so it's nice pick things that work. They used, and I'm glad you pointed out, are like positive, destructive, helpful, hurtful. But beneficial and non-beneficial. That's my litmus test is, and I got it from Ellen Wallace, who is up there, yeah, top that side. When he was a monk and he was coming to the U.S. and he's a fully ordained monk, I think it's 256 vows around there, 254, 250, something like that, a lot of vows. Pretty hard to keep those vows in a modern Western culture. And he knew he's going to break it right off the bat, like get in a car with a woman who's picking him up at an airport, you know. And so he had asked his teacher, he said, you know, I have all these vows, you know, back to the rules, back to the, you know, those things. And, you know, there's just no way I'm going to be able to keep all these. And you know, what do I do? And his teacher said, before you do something, just ask yourself, is this beneficial? Is this the most beneficial thing to do for the greater good? And I thought, wow, that's my little limits. Mine had always been, is this helpful? You know, how can I be helpful? But I like this, is this beneficial in the long term? And so, yeah, sometimes getting in a car to go to give a Dharma teaching could be beneficial. And so the sort of rules around monastic life, they mostly grew up. It's not like the Buddha said, you're going to be a monk, we got all these rules. It was like, I'm going to ordain you, we're going to be a monk, and then this monk gets in trouble. And you go, okay, we got a rule now. And then this happened. Okay, now we got another rule. And that's really how the vows came. They came about by, it caused some struggles, and they could see the benefit in having a vow. And the vows are really just to help, you know, maintain some purity of mind. So, but there's a higher, you know, like bodhisattva vows are actually technically higher than monastic vows. And ultimately they're, how can I be of most benefit? And so asking that question, that's why your set of morals can prevent you from doing, you know, the right thing in this situation. What's most beneficial? And so that helps me, Mark, in the messiness of all this. And even after answering that question, I can mess it all up. But at least I asked the question, you know, at least I asked the question. So the way karma is related to all of this is the most significant impact of an action of karma is our motivation. So the more we can bring that motivation, whatever we do, however it turns out, if we've got that motivation, you're going to have a better outcome, period. So, but beneficial for the greater good, not beneficial for John. You know, what's the healthiest thing to do?
You said the most important thing related to karma is the intention.
Yep.
So
Yep.
not the outcome.
Nope. Not the outcome. Yeah.
So, you know, like suppose a mechanic's working on a car or the school bus and bleeding the brakes or something, and makes a mistake, and the school bus goes off the road and a bunch of people die. His intention was to make the bus safer. That's more important karmically.
Yes. So just for you online that may not have heard, example, you know, the question was, most important in karma is the intention, the motivation. And those are actually two different things a little bit, but a conscious motivation, intention, I think it's a good way of putting that. My intention is going to far outweigh an outcome. So he had a great example of someone working on a school bus and bleeding the brakes, let's say, doesn't do it properly. The brakes go on the bus and some people die. So the outcome's pretty terrible, but he never intended to kill anyone, right? So the weight of killing, very different. Then, okay, I want to kill some kids, I'm going to mess up the brakes, right? Very different experience. And again, as we get into this, we'll go through how karma gets really into that. But motivation, our intention is always going to be most important. Because we have no idea how outcomes would be, and we really don't. And there's always never any one person that's responsible for any one thing. Somebody had to build the bus, somebody had to create the brake system. So, yeah, I mean, there's so many factors. And then the roads and safety and, the driver's ability to maybe notice spongy brakes or not, just so many things that you could bring into that. Everything that we experience, everything that we have, everything that we do, are influenced, impacted, and related to countless others, And that's something I always keep in mind when we want to beat ourselves up for making a mistake, and also recognize when we do good that so many people have helped us. Very helpful, this interdependent experience that we're all having. Okay, well, let us go ahead and set up for our dedication. I'm gonna bring that up on share it. So we have cultivated a great deal of merit and hopefully some wisdom. And we'll have an opportunity to dedicate that collective merit and wisdom for the benefit of all beings and for our own continued spiritual growth, the basis of which is always ethics. Without that, it doesn't matter. So let us dedicate. By this merit, may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore, for the benefit of all. All right, well, really fun to have some people in-house. They've got a full house over there at Gunnison. And those of you that join online independently and even from Canada. Wow, we're getting international here. I appreciate the opportunity to do this. Our retreat begins tomorrow. We do, those of you might be new, we do retreats every 6 months about. So in the fall and then in the spring at Juanita. And but I'll be back here Wednesday. So we'll be back here Wednesday. But Sunday we will not do the Chenrei Sig practice because I'll be in Gunnison. All right. Well, thanks so much. Lots of love to you all. Please be well. Take good care of yourselves and good care of those around you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody.